Hey everyone, I hope you are all enjoying your end of year break. This video will be the first of a two-part series that compiles all the morsels of information that we got this month and my thoughts on them as we speed ahead to God of War's early 2018 release window. Right off the bat, I know the most disappointing thing was the lack of a release date announcement, as this seemed to be the only real certainty going into PSX, but I will get onto that later. Corey started off his slot on the PSX presentation by telling us that the game is currently in its final stages and that they are doing a lot of playtesting to fine-tune everything. I think it is obviously past the alpha stage, as this usually occurs around 8 to 10 months before release, and the release window is a lot closer than that. For the uninitiated, a game in alpha contains all major features, but new ones may still be implemented. While it is playable during this phase, not all assets are actually finished. The beta phase is more about polish and dealing with bugs, crashes and any performance issues, so it's more likely that this is where this studio is currently at, but we don't know for sure. Over the last 4 or 5 playtests before PSX, Corey announced that the total gameplay time from beginning to end is clocking in at between 25 to 35 hours. For a game that won't be open world with a litany of question marks to uncover, this is definitely quite surprising. If I am being honest, I was actually predicting the story mode to last between 12 to 15 hours for most people, and then 25 to 30 for completionists that like doing everything. We also have to remember that Corey was asking people to temper their expectations when it came to story length at around this time last year on Twitter, which he did acknowledge at the presentation.
It was in the maybe 10, 15, 20 hours.
Yeah, that's what I was telling people.
Yeah.
And then we sort of accidentally made it a lot bigger.
Oops. Yeah. It's twice as big as we expected. That's funny.
Yeah.
While a range of 25 to 35 hours does sound great, it is important to note that game length is a figure that is normally overestimated by game developers. The results can vary pretty significantly when you're testing internally compared to when you release it out to millions of people. I remember when it was revealed by industry insider Shinobi602 that the Order 1886 would take 8 to 10 hours on a normal playthrough and 10 to 12 if you took your time. These figures would of course have been garnered from their playtesters internally, but 2 weeks before the game even came out, someone had uploaded a playthrough of them completing the game in only 5 hours. That person must have been rushing it though, because the average was roughly 7 hours at a normal pace, but this was still less than what the developers were expecting. 25 to 35 hours is still really good news though, because even if it turns out that they have overestimated it, it means that we'll end up with roughly 16 to 20 hours at the very least, which is still a very substantial amount of content. I don't think we'll be in a situation where their estimates are way off, to the point where the game only ends up being around 8 to 10 hours. Even then, that wouldn't really be a deal breaker for me, because I've always been more concerned with what a game does in the time that I have with it, as opposed to how long it keeps me busy. So how have we ended up in a position where the next game in the series is projected to be longer than God of War 1, 2 and 3 combined? It was reiterated by Corey that they are treating the game like a tour bus that gives the player the freedom to get off whenever they want to look around, and then to get back on when they want to continue the story. I thought that perhaps this was a reference to getting on the boat in each of the different environments, but the tour bus is the narrative itself in the sense that you have the path of the main story, and then all of these other side stories that can be discovered if you decide to wander off. It makes sense when you consider the fact that a boat won't always be there when exploring each realm. With the game not being open world, but placing a heavier emphasis on exploration, I think we can expect the wide linear approach being adopted, as it was in Uncharted and Tomb Raider. The Western Ghats section from The Lost Legacy comes to mind in particular, where the player was free to drive around in a jeep and could stop to engage in some side activities. These areas work so well because they give the player a greater sense of agency, all while still maintaining a focus on the narrative, as they are only introduced when they work to serve the main storyline. Though I'm expecting entirely different storylines to be introduced if you go off in a different direction, rather than some extra tasks to tick off based on what was said in the podcast under episode 1 of The Lost Pages. Apparently, translating the game of a different realm and then translating it back to Elder Futhark could open up new sections of the game that offer quest lines, which does suggest some additional story content outside of whatever is going on with the main journey. We can't forget that the press was shown an illustration of how these ideas would play out all the way back in 2016 with an extended version of the gameplay demo. They saw different routes being taken and crafting resources being found in addition to pieces of armor. This was really the first hint we had that players will be able to customize the way that Kratos and Atreus look. We saw new outfits for the first time in a short slice of gameplay from Paris Games Week, and I think that this will be one of the main ways that the game rewards players for taking their time to explore the environments. Going off of Corey's recent tweets, it's pretty safe to say that such items won't be locked away in loot boxes for a great sense of pride and accomplishment. We were told that the arena in that segment is an example of getting off the metaphorical tour bus to go on a detour, as we were told that it is not on the path of the main story. It does get me thinking though, does that mean players would miss Atreus' explanation of what a soul eater is if they decide to stick to the critical path?
That's a soul eater. If that kills us, that's it. No Valhalla, no hell, no afterlife, ever.
A new Game Plus mode was also hinted at a while ago, which should please those looking for more longevity after completing the game. Coupled with the hunt for the Platinum Trophy, I'm sure players will be able to extract many hours of more fun after finishing the main campaign. Corey then went on to tell us that his dog ate the release date after being pushed to answer the question of when the game will actually come out. In other words, they just aren't ready to give us a solid date just yet. They know the fans are hungry, but it's something I can respect because I would rather that it's done this way instead of announcing one prematurely and then deciding to push it back. I think Sony are really trying to move away from giving gamers news of delays as they have in recent years, and that is why we don't have specific dates for a lot of the big exclusives that are scheduled for 2018. Uncharted 4, The Last Guardian, Bloodborne, Horizon Zero Dawn, all of these games were delayed at one point, and this is obviously the result of announcing stuff when the teams aren't 100% ready and confident. Don't get me wrong, it is still very likely that we'll be playing God of War by March at the latest, because Sony Santa Monica have been reassuring fans recently that the game is still due to come out in early 2018, and anything beyond March doesn't really fit within that window. The Paris Games Week gameplay segment also kept this release window at the end when it was shown again with Corey's commentary. The ESRB, which is the organisation in charge of assigning age ratings to games in the US, has classified God of War as an M for mature, with a fairly descriptive summary on what we can expect. This is probably the biggest sign that we have that the game is not far off, as in most cases, the age rating is assigned only a few months before release. Furthermore, the official artbook is still slated to release on the 15th of March 2018. Artbooks normally contain spoilers for what happens in games, so they must still be working towards a date that is around that time. The 15-inch statue that Sony Santa Monica recently teased on Twitter is also due between March to May of next year, which could be telling us a more specific release window, but we don't know for sure. Either way, March is already looking to be a very packed month for games, with much anticipated releases like Yakuza 6, MLB The Show, Ni no Kuni 2, A Way Out and Far Cry 5. Two of those games are full PS4 exclusives and one is a console exclusive. Sony would be wise to space out their schedule, even though you could argue that they all appeal to a different audience than God of War does. This is why it wouldn't be the end of the world for me if the early 2018 release window turns into a date that is in April or May. So that about rounds up what we know so far of the game's length, its more open nature, and the release window. My next video has already been recorded and will address the Revenant, Atreus' newly revealed power, and the ESRB rating that was assigned last week. I hope you guys enjoyed this one for now, and be sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out for more coverage on God of War.